we almost there, inshallah, when it comes to how long this program is running. Because today is checking today we are in the last week of this course. So this is the last week of course number two. For starting from next week, guys, will be only. I'll just give me 1 second to show you guys. Will be only few weeks. Let me show the schedule first. The schedule is here. Okay, so the schedule. Let me show the schedule first, guys, and then we will talk about the course. So this is the starting of the schedule. MashaAllah, we all started on 25th of September. You guys like doing really great job when it comes to MashaAllah being consistent, attending the course. So we already finished first week, second week, third week, fourth week, and we started the second course. We started about the course about the analysis and the detections, and we agreed why we already started with protection, and then we moved to detection. And so we started week five, we finished week five, and we finished week six. And mashallah, we have already managed to finish as well week seven. And we are right now in the last week of this course, which is week eight. And you can see here, we're going to be looking at, today we'll be going to looking at attack mitigation. So we will explain what kind of bugs that exist in our softwares and hardwares. And then later on, we'll be talking about how to attack these bugs. And then we finish by what is the procedures and mitigation procedures to stop these attacks. And also there is some recommendation how to really reduce and mitigate the risk of these bugs. So this is going to be the topic for today. And it's we have an assignments which is OWASP research. So OWASP is an organization, and they are really started as an open public organization, so they are not charging people money at all. So they come up every year or every 3 years with a list of all the vulnerability that exist, and I will explain how they come up with this list and what is the most recent list they come up with. And they have a list of vulnerability that include cloud vulnerabilities, mobile vulnerabilities, you name it. It's all there. Web application vulnerabilities, all these vulnerabilities are there, and then it's also give a recommendation how to really look at how to mitigate these vulnerabilities. So this is going to be today's session. Also, we're going to tomorrow cover again cloud security. We have already talked about cloud security a little bit, but again, we'll try to talk about cloud security more in the next few days, because uh, what happened in the cloud security, the whole world is moving towards cloud, especially in the Middle East. So you will not find any place, you will not find any organization that's not somehow using cloud. So it's important to work at cloud as well. Okay, so we'll do in Wednesday a revision, okay, and we will do on Thursday another revision. So this is like gonna be quick revision. We'll be giving you some question. We will solve this question together, guys, and then inshallah, will be enough. Right now, guys, the exam is on Sunday, so this is confirmed. It's on Sunday. Okay, we are trying to work with with some authorities to move the exam to basically to Monday. If they agreed, it will be on Monday. If they didn't agree, the exam will be Sunday. Okay, and Monday we'll start our course about ethical hacking. So once we start this course, this is really the almost we are finishing um, uh, the course, because as you can see here, um, by I think by last, this is going to be our last week. This is 8th of or 10th of December, and then you have the last exam over here. So as you can see, the last week is all review for CEH exam, and then you will get an exam here. The built exam will be on 15. But as you can see, last week is only we will talk about password attacks in one day, and that's it. So I'm telling you guys, we are almost there. So hang on until we finish. We are just maybe 3 weeks away from the finishing of the program. Okay, so this is a good news that I wanted to share with you guys. Okay, can you guys raise your hand right now so everyone, so Abir can take the attendance? Okay, I can see everyone is, mashallah, raising his hand. Um, so as I mentioned, it's a good news because we are almost 3 weeks away from end of this program. And inshallah, in next program, which is CEH, is going to be more fun because CEH is all about hacking and how to hack system and how to really what is methodology we are going to do to hack systems. This is really like it's going to be fun, and we already talked about it before. So we talked about the kill chain. We talked about the methodology of attacking machines. So I think this is going to be exciting. Also, Abir can help in the hacking because she already had a lot of hands-on experience in hacking. So she will be giving you guys a small demo every day to show you a new hacking techniques. So this is will increase your knowledge about hacking as well. So this is really the good news that we have. So once we pass, inshallah, Sunday or Monday exam, we are gonna be having a lot of fun dealing with hacking every day. Okay, so I have already showed you guys the schedule for today, and also in the learning platform. If you guys wanted to check what we are covering today, you will find attack mitigations. And again, attack mitigation is talking about what vulnerability exists in the systems, okay, and how to really deal with this vulnerability and try to really get rid of these vulnerabilities and make sure that you mitigate the risk of these vulnerabilities. Okay, so this is going to be the topic for today. We can really review some stuff that we already talked about it before, which is something like XSS, which is cross-site scripting. We'll look at the SQL injection one more time, and we'll look at the XML attack and how to implement secure code practice in our environment to ensure security. Okay, so without further ado, let us go ahead and start the lecture today. Okay, so I'm just gonna give you a quick revision, guys, for what we have already talked about since the beginning of this course. I know that most of you guys are really now aware what we're doing, and if you work as a cybersecurity engineer, but this is good to remind you. End of day, organization, they hire you as a cybersecurity engineer or an analyst to basically reduce the risk. Okay, so your main goal inside any organization is to reduce the risk. Okay, in order to reduce risk, guys, you really need to be able to first of all understand what assets you have. Okay, so if you understand what assets you have, you understand also what kind of data you have. This is what we have covered yesterday: data classification, what kind of data we have, structured or unstructured. Okay, what is the life cycle of data, how to implement security in this life cycle. And we talked about, again yesterday, also about data structure. We talked about data format, data life cycle. We talked about different type of data classification for the data according to the priority of this data within the organization. So we talked about so many classification, and we talked also about what is the difference between cybersecurity and privacy. So this is all, guys, under the identify the relevant assets. So it's really it's good to understand what kind of data you have and what kind of laws and regulator controlling this data, so you'll be able to protect this data. And we mentioned yesterday, any organization, guys, in order to reduce the risk, they will have two external forces here that will allow them to really handle the risk within the organization. The first force here is going to be business objectives. So what is really business want to do? Okay, so you need to understand what is business are trying to do, and try to really secure the business objective. And you can secure the business objective by looking at the risk, okay, and try to mitigate the risk. Why? Because most of the business right now, guys, are relying in technology. So we can say that almost out of 10 new organization, 9 of them are really based on technology, and the day to day out, they are using technology system and IT system. So in order really to really ensure that they can achieve their objective, they wanted to be really secure. They wanted to do their operation in a safe way. They wanted to be profitable. They don't want to get any fines. Okay, so this is all objectives of a company. So in order to really achieve this, you need to really mitigate the risk of cybersecurity attacks. Why? Because they are relying on IT security. Sorry, they are relying on IT systems. And IT systems comes with different type of vulnerabilities, and there is too many different type of threats out there. And we explained this threats and vulnerability in so many times. We talked about also last week about something called vulnerability management and how to manage vulnerability within the organization, starting from identification all the way until we mitigate the vulnerability. So this is also important. We also talked yesterday about that regulator and laws in certain countries, okay, especially according to your geographical area, will impose some restriction when we deal with certain data. And that's why data classification is important, because you can tell this is a personal identification data, this is kind of financial data, this is kind of classified data, and you can, according to this classification, you can check with your legal department and your compliance department what kind of regulator and laws I have to really follow, because this is will help the company to really again to protect themselves from fines, okay, to protect themselves from lawsuits later on if the customer complains about what you are not practicing good security. And also it will help the company, guys, to really protect the assets in a proper way, and that will achieve them their objective and be a profitable company. So really, IT security, guys, I would say it playing a very important role right now in the company. And if you understand the whole cycle of mitigation the risk and really reduce the risk to the appropriate level, okay, you will be able to really to help the company in a big terms. Okay, and we have seen that I showed you before a diagram saying cybersecurity risk is considered one of the top 5 risks that organizations right now are facing. Why? Because one cyber successful attacks can take a company out of business. So we really need to be focused and really look at the holistic approach. Who is going to give us the holistic approach to protect the company and to really mitigate the risk is a standard. Okay, so we mentioned that we need to have a risk mitigation plans, and then the risk mitigation plans, we need to really follow a procedures or a standard to really reduce the risk. So we will strive to understand the risk, that what kind of business we are doing, okay, what kind of vulnerability we have, what kind of threats can really impact our businesses. And then the next thing we will think about it is standard or procedures to follow. And one of the standard and procedures that I already adapted since the beginning of this course, and I keep emphasizing why it's important, is NIST framework. Okay, again, the NIST framework is a holistic view for cybersecurity. Holistic view is going to allow you. So the last ones will have built exam. I think there is a project. Okay, so in the last months, guys, Ibtisam is saying is asking about the built exam. We are having also a built exam in the last months. So after we do ethical hacking materials, we'll do a built exam, and this built exam will be also having a hands-on. So this will be the only built exam with hands-on. So we'll give you a machine and we'll ask you to exploit this, okay, and write a report about what your finding is about this machine. Okay, so this could be the project that you need. Okay? I'm not quite sure if there is a separate task for a project, but I'm gonna double check and let you know. Okay, but we definitely have a built exam after we finish course number 3. Okay, so guys, again over here, we mentioned that our job is to mitigate the risk. So mitigating the risk what is the best approach to mitigate the risk is to follow a standard, because this as a standard will give you a full view what you need to do inside the organization. And that's why we choose NIST. And we mentioned there is so many NIST publication. There is NIST publication called 800 series. We have NIST publication called CSF, which is cybersecurity framework, and we have NIST publication specifically for risk management. Okay, what you need to implement for the holistic view, you need to look at what you really need to here to do in this 5 functions that we talked about. We said there is NIST CSF version 1.1, which is came out in 2019, and it included 2 area here, which is supply chain risk, and included also an area for identity and access management. Okay, so this is important. So this is gonna give you the what you really need to do. So I'm gonna work in a company. Okay, it will tell you, okay, look at the assets, look at the data classification. Okay, look at the software assets you have, look at the hardware assets you have, look at what kind of network connectivity you have, look at the printers you have. Okay, and then you understand the business environment. Okay, you understand the business mission, visions, okay, objectives, because this is will help you sit with a business owner, understand what they are trying to do, okay, how you can help them to save this business. So basically all of these guys gonna be part of your job in early beginning. I need to understand the assets, I need to understand every single assets we have in the organization, and I need to have to understand what is the business all about. Okay, identify governance framework. We'll talk about governance in one time. Okay, we didn't talk about governance, we talk about governance, which is basically when it comes to data governance. But we will talk about how to really implement governance within the organization, what kind of policies we need to implement, what kind of data governance we need to implement, what kind of rules and responsibilities we will do in our organization. This is going to be all and under governance. We didn't cover it yet, but I promise one day, inshallah, before the course finish, we will cover the governance part. Okay, we mentioned that you need, in order to really have, when you have a list of all your vulnerabilities, okay, when we have a list of our vulnerabilities, we really need to come up with a score for these vulnerabilities. And that's why we studied so far something called vulnerability scanning and vulnerability management. We talked about different vulnerability scoring system exist, okay? And we also gonna continue the picture of vulnerability, because this is a very important topic, by penetration testing and ethical hacking that we'll do next week. So this part is specifically looking at vulnerability within the organization is very high important part. Why? Because once you can see your weak point, you can implement controls. Okay, guys? Once you understand what is your weak point in the organization, you can implement controls to stop the attacker to exploit these vulnerabilities. So without understanding vulnerabilities, guys, it's really useless. Why? Because if you cannot see the vulnerability, what will happen is one of these threats will really manage to exploit this vulnerability. And that's what the attacker only looking for one certain vulnerability, whether it's in your network, whether it's in your hardware, whether it's in your software, whether in application, whether it's in the database, just to exploit one vulnerability to take over all the system. He may, or even exploiting one of the your employees or one of the end users. So here is really important, guys, to try to find all the vulnerabilities and try also to classify these vulnerabilities. You cannot, guys, hear? Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, with you, Mr. Shadi.
Okay, I'm not quite sure why. Okay, so here, guys, the vulnerability also classification is important, because this is will really give me the risk score, which is will allow me to really focus on the most area that is really high severity in my organization and try to mitigate the risk there. Okay, so in order to really, because again, end of day, companies doesn't have really unlimited resources to look at the cybersecurity risk and try to mitigate the cybersecurity risk. You cannot go to your manager and say we have 20 risks, okay, and we need to really deal with all these 20 risks. No, you have to highlight what is the most important risk right now, what is really the risk that can really cause a lot of trouble and a lot of issues within the organization and really to deal with. So we really need to come up with a risk score. Okay, and that's why we implement risk scoring, and risk scoring will allow us to put a priority and to put severity for risks, and then we can go back to the management and get enough funding to really deal with this risk. What kind of things that will help us to put this risk scoring? We need to understand the criticality of the assets. Okay, we need to understand the impact if we lose these assets. Okay, we need to understand what kind of threats out there and what kind of vulnerability exists in this asset. So you really need to come up with a really nice diagram or a really nice file for assets, asset criticality, asset impact, okay, and also threats and the vulnerability scoring. Asset criticality, guys, where it come from? It come from what kind of data exists in this asset, what kind of data this asset is handling, and this is again back to the classification of data. So all of these terms and technology are really related. So criticality comes, okay, I have a database. Okay, this database have all my customers. The database itself as a server is really, is not a big deal. You can really set up a new database in maybe a matter of 2 hours. Okay, but I'm saying what is really important inside this database that make it very critical is the data classification that I added to this. So there is my customer information, which is a personal information, my day-to-day products that I'm selling and buying from these customers. So this is also my financial data. So if something happened to this database, it could really be catastrophic event for me. Okay, so the data classification will help me also to understand the criticality of the assets. Okay, and you really need to sit with the business and understand the impact if we're losing these assets. Don't really come up with idea that the impact here can be low or high, because this is going to miss the whole risk equation thing. So we really need to understand the impact from the business owner. And we talked yesterday about rules and responsibilities when it comes to data owners and data owners, data rules and responsibilities. And we talked that the rules and responsibilities we call, so there is something called data owner, and it's usually the head of department, like the sales department or the HR department. You really need to talk to these guys, understand how important is this database and how important this and what kind of impact will happen if we lose this database. So this is what we have covered yesterday already. This is like a quick revision for what we covered. Okay. And we mentioned here, guys, before, and I keep telling you, this is already we covered this week, protection to your assets using identity and access management, using encryption, using, hashing, and all this stuff using, for example, implementing IEEE to our data. So this is all, guys, we have already covered in a very deep details. And I'm telling you, it's important to know what kind of mitigation techniques that you really need to implement in order really to protect your data. So we talked about different techniques like network techniques like firewall, IDS, IPS, web application firewall. If we have time this week, guys, inshallah, I will give you a quick demo for how to implement web application firewall, okay, in AWS. So you can guys see how it's being implemented. How can we set the policy? How can we stop the traffic to come according to certain attacks? So this is also nice to see web application firewall working. Also, we mentioned that there is also techniques that really can mitigate the attack service. So this is how to harden your environment. And hardening the environment, you need to check the user that has an access to the system. You need to check the service that has access to the system or running on this system. You need to really lower your attack service as much as you can. And finally, we also mentioned there is an application techniques. We talked about application techniques like, for example, input validation, and we talked about different kind of mitigation techniques to really protect um, our assets, our applications. And we mentioned also here it's also saying that we need to spread awareness and training. This is on for end user who is using our system, because we will see later, inshallah, when we start in the ethical hacking course, we see that the attacker, when they gather information about your environment, they gather information about everything. They gather information about your network defenses. They gather information about your system, operating system, and what kind of operating system you're running. They gather information about application and what application you're running and which versions you are running. And they gather information about your employees as well. So they wanted to find out what is their emails, what is their hobbies, if they have a social account numbers and all the stuff. And there's so many tools will allow the attacker to gather information about your employees. And later on, if they know your employees very well, if they know his email, if they know what kind of person he is from his LinkedIn profile or from his maybe social media profiles, then they can target and social engineer this person. So this is really important as well, and that's why the managing awareness and training is important. Why? Because we're trying to think like a hacker. What the hacker will do, what does hacker will how he will perceive our network and our operating system and employees, and we try to really countermeasure this. So spreading training is also a new as a countermeasure, and we call this managerial controls. Okay, guys. So we talked about data security, and we mentioned that the data security, you need to implement the principle of defensive depths and how defensive depths is working, and how to implement encryption. And we talked about so many different type of encryption. Talk about symmetric encryption, or asymmetric encryption, or certificate, or PKIs. We talked also about, how to. Yesterday we were talking about that you really need to protect the data in the three states of the data, which is basically data at rest, data at motion, data also in use. So this is all of the stuff that we can really talk about data security. If you guys remember, we talked about something called, eventually it's called the cube of assurance. And the cube of assurance, you need to really protect your data on all the states of the data, whether data at rest or transient or in motion, and you need to implement managerial controls, technical controls, and also physical controls. And this is gonna and these controls need to be able to assure confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So this is what we call assurance cube. Okay, so all this we have already covered. Was basically the first course that we have covered. The second course was really dedicated in the early 2 weeks, guys, about detection techniques. Why? Because all these prevention techniques, as we knows all these prevention techniques, the attacker knows about these prevention techniques, and they always working day and night to really bypass these techniques. So I mentioned that if your prevention techniques couldn't really stop the attacker, it was not implemented in a holistic way, you still have a risk that you didn't cover. For example, we have so many technologies right now. So understanding all this technology and implementing really all the prevention technique for this technology is going to be really, really impossible. Okay, so we have so many new technologies like cloud computing, bring your own device, containers and virtualization. So this is all new technologies, and some of these technologies are vulnerable. So the attacker, if they are very advanced attacker, like advanced resistant threats, ABTs, or they are nation states, they will manage to bypass these prevention controls. Okay, and that's why we need detection controls. So we have already covered in an entire course, or maybe 2-3 weeks, we were talking about how to detect the attack and how to detect these attacks using reactive techniques and proactive techniques. And we mentioned reactive techniques. This is would be your SOC team and incident response. They would be out there trying to really detect if something happened, and then accordingly they will start to implement the incident response planning. And we talked about incident response and the procedures of incident response. Okay, and also we mentioned that proactive means really means that you're trying to find threats before they exploit you. Okay, so finding threats, guys, is basically we called it a threat hunting, and we mentioned what is the threat hunting is all about, and we have already covered as well the process of threat hunting and the process of threat intelligence. So this was the early beginning in the course, and we have introduced you to the tools that will allow the SOC engineer to really see data coming from different sources of logs. And we mentioned also we need to collect logs and data from different resources, whether it's coming from network feeds, or whether it's coming from your application operating system feeds, or whether it's coming from the middleware, or whether it's coming from your web application, and also data about users and data about administrators. We need to have it all in one centralized place, and we explain the SIM solution and how SIM is going to collect and grab all this data, normalize it, and then correlate between events, and then eventually allow the SOC engineer to highlight if there is an incident taking place. So we have already covered this also in a 2 or 3 lectures. And finally, we came back to look at the areas that we didn't cover. So we covered the supply chain management. And in the supply chain management, guys, I told you, usually companies, they get their softwares and hardware from a vendor, okay? And you really need to implement security when it comes to these software and hardware. So don't assume the hardware that you get is secure, or don't you assume the software you are getting is secure. So we kind of come back again to this topic today, because you know what? Once I get a software, okay, I need to implement testing on this software. Okay, I need to really verify if this software is really secure before I deploy it in my organization. Okay, but this is really, I would say, a very late stage. Why very late stage, guys? Because already the software has been developed and it's already out there. So in order to do modification, and this software will be very hard. And that's why in today's lectures, we're gonna try to say, okay, you know, in order to really to avoid vulnerabilities, or to avoid introducing new vulnerabilities into your system, you really need to be involved early beginning before the software developed. So we as a company right now, we need maybe a finance software, okay? So we really need to look at this life cycle of how the software is developed, okay, and get involved and add the security feature that we want from early beginning. And the end, I will also test the software. Okay, so this is kind of back to the supply chain. Why? Because we are relaying an application, guys. You will not find any organization you go to, okay, and you will not find a special software running. You can find for maybe a web application running out there. So who developed this web application? Okay, did they develop it with security in mind, or the security was afterthought? Yani once they have the website up and running, they said, okay, let us implement security. And I'm telling you, once you develop the software, to add security feature, it's going to be hard. Okay, so it's really, we really need to understand how they develop the software, and we try to embed inside the operations or inside the life cycle, guys, the security. And that's why, guys, inshallah, if we have time, I will show you something which is maybe in the end of this course. It's called DevOps. Okay, so what is DevOps is all about? Okay, what is DevOps is all about? And this is becoming a really important jobs right now that comes in the market. Okay, and who comes up with DevOps? Okay, and also we have also seen a job that started to really emerge right now as something called Dev. Okay, Sec Dev SecOps. So DevSecOps. Okay, so what is really what is the difference between DevOps and DevSecOps? So DevOps, guys, it means, okay, in earlier days when we developed systems, it took so many times, it took much time to develop the system and then deploy the system in the organization server and stuff. So I will give you an example. So let's say that you developed a software. Now you need to go to operation team. The operation team is the one that's are responsible for, having hardware, installing Windows, installing on the top of this Windows all the framework you need for your software to run. Okay, and then get all this done. It will require time here and time here to deploy. Okay, and this is usually takes so much time because you need to contact someone in operation and ask him for a free or virtual server, and you call this the guys in the virtual servers, you ask him to install the updates, to install this extra framework, and it will take time to deploy a new development. And the West, or especially people who used to work in SDLCs and Agile, and I'll explain what is SDLC, Agile in a bit. Okay, they used to complain that the operational team are really stopping them from deploying deploying the new software. Okay, and that was not acceptable. Why? Because I wanted really to develop and deploy some website like, for example, Facebook, Netflix, Google. They have almost deployment. They have almost development every day, or sometimes multiple times every day. So I cannot really wait for the operational team to bring a server and to get the server ready. They started to combine this together in one life cycles. So once they develop, they will be able to deploy right away. Okay. What really encouraged them to do this, and what really I would say was in a very important part of this, is cloud computing. Okay. So you can see now that cloud computing, guys, and DevOps was really, existing of the cloud, because you can run an instance right now. You can have instance of Windows 2019 or Windows or Linux or Amazon Linux in like 1 minute. So now I can develop and I can deploy in no seconds. And there is something called infrastructure as a code. We'll explain this later on. But just I'm telling you, they have already managed with the assist of cloud computing to really deploy their development in a very rapid way. Okay, which is really good for an environment where there is a lot of competition. So, for example, Facebook is competing with maybe another organization. They wanted to really, like TikTok, they wanted really to deploy new features. So before the TikTok deploying it, so they really working day and night to just to deploy quickly. So they cannot say, okay, the server is not there. So cloud computing with the idea of development and operationals combined together allow company to be more competitive in the market. And that is the whole, I would say, the whole motive behind DevOps. And now if you just open LinkedIn and write just DevOps engineer, you find thousands of jobs, especially now in the West, but it started to really catch up here in the Middle East. You can see that this job is started to really emerge. Just before we go in DevSecOps, guys, I wanted to explain the DevSecOps, okay, because this is another also concept that is started in the West, and again, it is started to emerging here. So you can find in LinkedIn some jobs right now started to really appear in the market here. You're looking for DevSecOps. What is the DevSecOps? Okay, as an engineer. Okay, so the problem was here, guys. So the development team, they finished development, and right away they deployed their development in the cloud. So you are up and running, and it's your development now in the cloud. What if your development, okay, does have a vulnerability? Okay, because we know where is vulnerability coming from. So vulnerability is coming from different sources. Okay, vulnerability can comes from misconfiguration. So you, for example, have already configured a server here, and this server you didn't give a proper security group or proper IAM, which is identity access management, to the server. So this misconfiguration can come in the deployment in operation. Okay, so this is one of the source of vulnerability. The vulnerability itself can comes from the software or the development that you did. So you maybe used one function which is vulnerable. Okay, so introduce it something, for example, can lead to the attacker to input something that can cause issues with the database. So or maybe issues with the web interface itself or the application itself. So the vulnerability coming from misconfiguration, vulnerability coming from unsecure code practice. Okay, vulnerability comes from that you are using some function and some libraries from another code which is not secure. So this is also a source of vulnerability. Okay, how can we really find these vulnerabilities? Because this vulnerability, if it's deployed right away to the cloud, so I have issues with misconfiguration, I have issues with the code itself, and I have issue with using some components in the code which is not secure. Okay, so now I have three different type of vulnerability in this code is in the cloud. You know what means the code is in the cloud and deployed? Means everyone sees it. In a matter of hours, someone will scan your website, find this vulnerability, and exploit your systems. Okay. So what was the solution? The solution is don't wait the deployment here to be done. Don't wait for the DevOps to deploy here and start to look at the security, because this is going to be so late. Okay, why? Because you already the deployment is there. Okay, so if you started to scan the system, maybe the attacker would be more fast, like more quicker than you, and really find the vulnerability. So they said, okay, let's us. So the security used to be after this, after you deploy and you finish with coding, you do security. So he said, okay, was basically the security was on the right hand side. So he said the opportunity right now is to move to left or move back. So we get the security and we involve it here in between. Once we develop, we will do the security, and then we will deploy here, and then we do another security measurement here. So I will explain what's happening here. Okay, so how can we do this? So once you develop the software, guys, remember we talked about once about static analysis, and what is static analysis is all about. You write your code right now. Okay, so your code now is not executed yet. It's just a bunch of code of lines of codes, maybe 10,000 lines or 5,000 lines, and it also include all the library and all the components and all the APIs that you're gonna use in this code. At that time, guys, you include security. So you buy maybe a static analysis software. There's so many out of them. Some of even your web application firewalls, they can do static analysis. So you will look for a certain vulnerability. Again, certain vulnerability according which component you are using, which programming language you're using, which SDK you use to develop these applications. Once I found vulnerabilities, I can tell to my engineers to fix these vulnerabilities, okay, or to fix these issues. So once they fix the issue, guys, I know that my code right now is clean from vulnerabilities. Now I can deploy my code in the cloud. Once I deploy my code to the cloud, I will really run another type of security assessment. That's what we call dynamic assessment. So I have managed to do security here and here, okay? Why? Because the dynamic security will be able to find vulnerability when the code runs, okay? And when the instance are running, okay? So I do security before the code is being pushed to operation, and I will do code review or dynamic analysis once the code has been deployed and is up and running. So now if there is a vulnerability, again, I will come back to the developer and say, fix this vulnerability, okay? And some companies, they taking it to the next level. What is the next level? They're not gonna do only dynamic analysis, because dynamic analysis usually is about to scan the systems and codes for vulnerability using a scanner, okay? They include in this case as well, they include something called penetration testing. So penetration testing, once you finish your dynamic analysis, I wanted to really be aggressive and validate if there is any vulnerability that my vulnerability scanners have already highlighted. So I will get the penetration testers in this case, and I will really do a penetration testing to my instance here. Okay, if I find any vulnerability, whether it's in the operation or whether it's in the development, I can highlight it and I can send it back for the same cycle again to fix this vulnerability before we deploy the code in an instance, or before we publish this code to the public. This is what I have just explained to you guys, is showing the right trend right now in the markets of development and in the market of security. And this is where I can see most of you guys will be working. Okay, that's why I'm emphasizing about the part of cloud, because you will find yourself here, guys, are doing dynamic analysis, penetration testing, and also you're going to be doing the cloud security part. Because why? Because I told you, where we need security, we need to see someone in security to look at the development, okay, and to look at the famous vulnerability exists in the development. We knows if we can, we knows if there is a development mistake. We know if there is an unsecure coding issues. And in the same time, once they deploy this, okay, in a cloud, we really need to implement security in the cloud and implement run dynamic scanning on this instance, and maybe you should have also some penetration testing experience. That's what we will cover in the next course. Okay, so this is how it works right now. Any questions so far, guys, about the DevSecOps and why we need DevSecOps? I hope this was not too much for you guys. Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes, with you, Mr. Shadi.
Okay, good. So here, let's go again, guys. We will look at again why we need this, because a lot of organization right now, they will go ahead and they develop their own software. Okay, especially if you are working in a big bank or a big government institutions. Okay, or when they will really look for a software, they will go back and say, you know what, I wanted really a software that's really can achieve this requirement. So we kind of, guys, we end up in an organization where you develop your own software or you getting a software from someone. Okay, so if you're getting a software from someone, you really need to be clear about your requirement of security. Why? Because there is a lot of vulnerabilities, a lot of issues with our software. Okay, so there is a bugs. Okay, there is exposure of sensitive data. Okay, one SQL injection attacks can really can cause exposure of sensitive data. Okay, flow in injections. Okay, buffer overflow. Okay, someone injecting code to really change certain area in the memory and cause trouble by executing his own code instead of the right code. Okay, so this is buffer overflow. We'll try to cover it today. Security misconfiguration, especially in the cloud. Okay, especially if you are deploying in the cloud, and I know that's most of the organization right now, they are moving towards cloud. So you really need to look at the security configuration in the cloud. That's why identity and access management and web application firewall, how to implement VPD, like the virtual cloud environment network is important. How to add access list, how to add security list in the cloud. This is kind of things that we, inshallah, if we have time, we'll cover it. Okay, broking access control. Someone managed to really broking your IAAA. Okay, so he gets to act as an authorized person, which is not authorized, or maybe he did something like privilege escalation. Okay, insecure deserialization. We'll talk about this. I think we covered maybe before, but we will talk about what is insecure deserialization. Broking missing authentication. Okay, someone managed to really bypass your authentication, or you didn't apply authentication in a proper way. So this is all kind of vulnerability that exists in the software. We need to really identify this vulnerability. How can we identify this vulnerability? I'm telling you that the world right now are going to the DevSecOps phase. Okay, so once someone written the code for you, whether this is an engineer, whether you're within your organization, so you are they saying it's a built-in, or you cook this software within your organization, so you have a team, so they will bring you, okay, as a security consultant, as a security engineer. Tell us what you think about this. Okay, you need to implement the static analysis, the dynamic analysis, the scanning, the vulnerability scanning, and all the stuff. And then also you need to be able to do penetration testing. So they will hire you to do the DevSecOps. I remember recently I had an interview. They didn't tell me anything. They said, okay, you know what? We will give you an assignment. Okay, build your own web application. Okay, do static analysis. Show us the static analysis phase. Okay, and then once you pass the static analysis, okay, so this is what they call it pipeline. Once you pass the static analysis, okay, deploy the servers in the instance in the cloud, do a vulnerability scanning, show us the results of the vulnerability scanning, okay, and then finally show us the configuration you did in the cloud. This is kind of new interview because it's a company based in the US. So they wanted to see you hands on. What can you do? Okay. So this is things that I can see that is gonna be also it's gonna happen to you guys later on when you started the career in cybersecurity. Okay, again, so there's so many there are so many vulnerabilities, and we really need to keep in our mind there is also many platforms out there. Yeah, our interview are so hard. So which interview have? So I'm telling you guys for a beginning positions. Okay, for beginning as a beginners or someone beginning, you should be able to really talk about cybersecurity. You should be able to represent yourself as someone who understands cybersecurity from the top management approach or from the technical approach. Okay, once you understand all these approaches, okay, so you know that they find someone who understands security and why security is important. So if you give them the idea that you understand, they will hire you. Okay, why? Because they know that you are fresh graduate. They're not expecting you that you can create a pipeline with security included, with static testing and dynamic testing and cloud security. They're not expecting from you because especially you are just starting your career. But they wanted to see if you have the knowledge and you understand the stages of security. That's why I keep emphasizing about NIST. Okay, in interviews they will ask you what standard you will follow. Okay, why? Because you wanted to understand that are you a technical guy who never heard about standards and everything, or you are someone who understands that we have to have a policy, we follow a proper standard, and then we apply the controls to mitigate the risk. So they really wanted to understand this and they wanted to see your mentality as a person. So this is early beginning in the jobs. It's important to get the full picture. Okay, guys. So here over here, this is are the platforms that is really exists right now. So the platforms is you can just find vulnerabilities in everything. The web application, mobile application, embedded application like IoT systems application. Okay, firmware. The firmware is the software that can manage a hardware, especially for example, if you guys are familiar that's our computers that have something called firmware, which is a BIOS early beginning software. So this is a firmware. Okay, system on a chip. There's an existing application that works in only on one chip. Okay, any client server application, like for example Windows. Okay, and Windows environment. This is a client server applications. Okay, this is could also have vulnerabilities. So vulnerability exists in so many platforms, okay? And there's so many vulnerabilities out there. So how can we really mitigate the risk? And that's why I will explain to you something called the SDLC. SDLC is a software development life cycle. So the development life cycle, you guys, if you, I don't know if you have studied uh, programming in the university, you know, how many of you guys studied programming in the university? Hello? Only aside? Okay, so I can see, mashallah, most of you. So most of you knows what is SDLC is all about, right? So the SDLC was the early beginning uh, development or software development, right? So this is was the early beginning, and that's what has been replaced by DevSecOps right now, by the way. So, but again, and for people who never heard about the SDLC guys, okay, SDLC is a way to develop a new piece of code or a new piece of software, okay, and it include stages. And in every stage, okay, you will be doing some certain task, and eventually you will get the software that you were really planning for in the beginning. So the beginning, you will have an idea or you have a problem to solve. So this is what planning is all about. This is where the softwares come from. I wanted the software to help me with finance. Okay, I wanted a software that can help me to tackle finance issue with my organization. I wanted a software to calculate hashing. Okay, I wanted a software to do hashing collision. So this is the software. I wanted the software to exploit systems like Metasploit. Okay, so this is was the idea. Uh, the idea here is that in the planning phase, you have an idea or you have an issue or you have an error that you wanted to fix or you have a problem, a real life problem that you wanted to fix, and you started with the planning phase. This is the planning is basically I'm just, this is not the right one. I will show you the SDLC, and then I will go back to secure SDLC, because we have secure SDLC, which is coming from Microsoft and OWASP, how to embed security in every stage. So, if you guys allow me, I will go just explain the life cycle, because I don't want you guys to be really, some of you have not studied development of the life cycle before. So the development of life cycle is meant, guys, to really take you into every stage until you develop a software. Okay, starting from a planning until deployment and execution. Okay, so here's the planning. The purpose of the first phase is to find out the scope of the problem. Okay, create the project to phases, create the risk. Okay, if Sam is saying this is a methodology, you mean the secure SDLC, right? Okay, and to find out the scope of the problem and to determine solution, resources, cost, time, benefits, and others items should be considered here. So guys, if you can see here, this is the early planning. I have a problem. Okay, I wanted to estimate the cost, estimate the resources I need to implement this program, those problems, and to solve this problem with software. And I need also to have an idea how long it will take for me to really come up with this execution. So this is the planning phase. Once we finish the planning, we go for the requirement and the system analysis. And as you can guys see, the requirement, the system analysis, what we require the systems to do, what kind of functionality this software will do. Okay, so this software is going to be calculating hashing. Okay, that means I will have, for example, a requirement to receive a hash, and then I will have multiple algorithms to do calculating the hash, is a MD5 or SHA-1 or SHA-2, and then the results will be showing it to the end user. So this is an idea for the software. So we need to really write the requirement in a very precise way and clear way. There is a course I taught once about how to write the requirement, how to really be very specific when you write the requirement. So there is no confusion about your requirement. Why? Because this is what we will take from this phase and go and look at the system design. So if you messed up with writing the requirement, the whole system will be definitely something else. That's why there is always saying, if you are writing the requirements, okay, to build a software, and you really didn't like it, write it in the proper way, you will end up with a completely different software than the one you require. So in this time, we need to write requirement in a proper way. So here's the second phase, is where teams consider the functional requirements. Okay, the functional requirements, what function we need from this program of the project or solution. It's also where system analysis take place, or analyze the need of the end user to ensure the new system can meet these expectations. So this is where their company, okay, are sitting with the developer or with someone called the business analyst, and tells them, okay, I wanted software to do so and so and so and so, okay, and the end user will do so and so and so. Okay, so this is basically function and non-function requirements are going to be written here in this area. Okay, as you can see, once we agreed about the function requirement, the software developer or this company that's going to develop for you the software will go back and do something called system design. I wanted to really come up with a design that can really achieve this requirement, or can really attain this requirement. Okay, okay, you need the database, which operating system you will use, which web application you will use, which framework you will use in this web application. So all these system designs and all these tiers of connectivity that I will need, I will do it in the design. Okay, why? Because I wanted to achieve or to attain also the requirement here. So here the system design is saying, the third phase describe in details the necessary specification, feature, and operation that will satisfy the functional requirement of the proposed system, which will be in place. Okay, once guys, we already agreed about the system design, here is the part which is, okay, khalas, we agreed this is going to be a web application. This a web application, guys, will be using, we're going to be using, for example, a database. This database is going to use MySQL. I'm going to use to develop this web application PHP, or maybe Java or Node.js or whatever the language, or even C Sharp. Okay, the web application itself, the presentation layer will be done with JavaScript. So we agreed about everything here, and you agreed about how the system looks like when it comes to how the data will flow from one tier to another tier. So the data flows is going to be also here. Once you have this all in your mind, then you start to develop. So you start to develop to why? To achieve this, to achieve the requirement that's required here. Okay, I need a login screen, so I will create a login screen. I will add how the username and password will be validated. Okay, I will add the code for it. So this area is development, is where the proper code will be written. Okay, to why? To achieve the system analysis and the requirement of the system. Okay, so if I wanted a web application, for example, to for a banking, okay, so how can I create a model for this? I'm gonna use object-oriented programming, so every users will be having a class or object, and all the development is happening here in this phase. So the real work started to begin here. The development phases marks the end of the initial section of the process. Additionally, the phase signify is okay, guys. And in the next phase, once the development is done, you start to do something called integration and testing. And integration and testing, guys, in a very simple way, خلاص, you already come up with the software. You already wrote the software in the development. You wanted to really to test this software. Okay, you wanted to test it from what? From multiple really point of view. You really wanted to test it from security point of view. So this is one of the really. Okay, you want to do something called unit testing. Unit testing means I'm gonna test each function alone here in this phase and make sure this function are working as it's supposed to do. Okay, I also wanted to do something called integration testing. So unit testing and integration testing means once these once the systems is up and running, let me see if this software will be able to run within the organization that I'm gonna run. So I'm gonna see if the application will be able to communicate with the database. The database will be able to communicate with the application layer. The user will be able to communicate with the front end productions or front end server. Okay, so this is gonna be integration. So you put this between a lot of components and see the integration. Once you finish the unit and integration and security, you can do also end user testing, where you get end user and ask them to start to use the system. Okay, guys. So here, or finding bugs and also end user testing. So integration testing over here, the phase provides system integration and system testing of programs and procedures, normally carried out by someone is called the quality assurance. So the guy who's gonna do all these testings, they are a certain role inside the organization. They are not developer, but they are we call it the quality assurance. We mean that we give them a list of all the requirements that we already required in this software. Okay, and this guy will take this requirement and start to test this system and say, you know what, this requirement is satisfied. After testing, this requirement is satisfied. This requirement is satisfied. One of this requirement is not there. So this is going to be his job. Okay. And how they do this? They create a username and password into the system, and they started to really test each and single requirement here, guys. Okay. Normally carried out by quality assurance professional to determine if the proposal meets the initial set of business goals. And there can you see, this is the person is gonna run his test and make sure. But again, as I told you guys, there's also so many at that time, so many tests that takes place, which is unit test, integration test, and also security test and end user test. Okay, implementation means خلاص, we got approval from that this software is exactly what the business required. Okay, and it's really achieved all the business and it passed all this test. So the unit test is okay, the integration test is okay, the security test is okay, and finally the quality test is okay. We can go ahead now and implement this. Implement means we will execute this systems in a servers or in a production, and then give really the client access to it. So the implementation, as you can see, this is the sixth phase when the majority of the code of the program is written and when the project is put into production by moving the data and components from the old system. The old system means, guys, a testing environment. Okay, so every single company they will have two environments. One is called production environment, and one of they have is called staging environment, called, for example, the testing environment. So you're moving it from testing to production, the from the old system and placing them in the new system via direct cutoff. So now we are moving the system from the testing environment, which is the quality engineer or quality assurance was able to access. Now we moved it to the production environment. Once in the production environment, we are done. خلاص. Operation and maintenance means the last phase is when end user can fine tune the system. So that now I will allow end user the idea here is the client now is testing the system. If he find any issues with the system, if he find any modification that's need to be done, it will always it will be given as a feedback, and then you get this feedback and you try to fix it with new updates or new iterations of the software. And maintenance means if there is a bug, if there is an issue that's happened in the system, you can highlight it also to the vendor, and the vendor will work to fix these bugs. Okay, so this is kind of the SDLC, guys. Okay, so if they wish to boost performance, add new capabilities, if they wanted to add new features or meet the additional user requirements. Okay, guys. So this is the SDLC. This is how you develop a software from scratch, from the planning phase all the way until this phase is already. But as we can see, guys, the security is also is mentioned one time only during the testing. Okay, but not in the requirement phase, not in the coding the coding phase, which is basically development. Only when we done the implementation or testing, when we finish the software, we started to talk about testing about security. So the security they say in this is in SDLC, it comes as an afterthought. And implementing security as an afterthought is going to be hard. Why? Because you need to go through all the function again and all the requirements again and add security to it. And this is always going to be headache, and it's not usually people are able to do this. And that's why Microsoft, long time ago, and all was okay, we come up with an idea of what we call secure SDLC. Secure SDLC that you need to embed security in every stage, from early beginning when you have the planning, all the way until you develop the software and give it to and deploy the software. So all this kind of area, guys, it need to be you need to embed security in it, and that will ensure you that you will get a secure software, and that's again will ensure you will mitigate the risk of supply chain. Why? Because the supply chain, you are getting software, you feel that it's a good software because you tested, but you don't know if it's really developed with the security in mind or not. So you really need to get involved with an early beginning when you are rating the requirement. You said, oh, I need my data to be encrypted. I need access login. I need session management. I need access control. I need to implement authentication and authorization and accountability and logs files. I need my application to be able to handle the error message. I wanted to look at the input validation in every single stage of my application. So this is all the security requirements that you need to be putting out there before even you start to develop. Why? Because it's easier to really implement things in very beginning, not after. Like يعني, the example that they always give us here, guys. Let's say that you are planning to build a house. Okay, you built the house, okay, with no security in mind. Okay, now you wanted modification. You wanted to install more locks, more safe rooms. You wanted to. Once the house is already built, it's very hard to really start to do modification because it's already built. If I wanted to open a wall, or if I wanted to add a door here, or if I wanted to close something, it would be hard to implement. But it's easier to say, okay, from the beginning, from the design phase, from the requirement phase, I wanted really my house to be secure. I wanted to have a door here. I wanted an area here for cameras. I wanted to have a safe room inside my house. In the beginning, it will be easy to implement, and that's the whole idea behind a secure SDLC. Okay. Thank you. So here, guys, if you can see, this is Microsoft and OWASP security development lifecycle. This is also, again, what we are seeing now today is DevSecOps. So the planning, you need to train developers and testers in security issues, acquire security analysis tools. This is where the acquire security analysis tools and to train these guys, is what we call the static analysis. Why static analysis? Because static analysis, once they write the code, I need someone to check this code. So there is so many ways to do this. There is something called peer review. So every time you write a piece of code, your manager or the team lead will review the code. So in order to spot anything which is not right, okay? But again, this is not always available because maybe all the other team members are really busy. So you really need to have an automated way to look at the codes and really identify if there is any vulnerabilities in the code. Okay, and you really need to have your developer to understand security and to understand the issue. And that's why, if you guys allow me here, I will share with you a document here for how to secure, how to write code in a secure way. So this is a document that I was looking at in the morning. This is called Software Security and Risk Principle Overview. It talks about input validation. It talks about output, encoding. We'll explain this concept, guys. It will talk to you how to handle authentication and passwords, how to handle session management, how to handle access control. So this is a secure coding practice that your that your developer should be able to really understand. And this is developed by OWASP. So this is a secure guide. Okay, and again, whoever who gonna work in development and security, you need to be able to really train his developers about this secure coding practice. Okay. So here is the first thing is training. You get the acquire software, okay, and ensure the security of development environment. The requirements here determine needs for security and privacy in terms of data processing and access controls. So here in the early beginning and your requirement, okay, what can you need to ask your question? What kind of data this system will handle? Okay, is it gonna finance data? Okay, it's customer data. So yeah, I'm developing a CRM, customer relation management systems. So it's gonna deal with my customer information, their private information. So I really need to ensure how the data will be handled how the data will be handled in transit, how the data will be handled in use. I will add the security requirements for all these stages, and I will give this requirement to my developer. So the developers now, they know that I'm really handling security in a proper way from early beginning. So this is what we meant here by data processing and access controls. And again, access controls means that who can access this data in the system. So we really need to implement IAAA, identification, authentication, authorization, and accountability, guys. And we really need at this stage also to sit with the data owner or the business owner to understand what is kind of data the system would be handling and what is the criticality of this data. So even data classification would be also involved in this case. So I understand that how what class the data will be dealing with. Is it secret data? Is it restricted data? Is it public data? So this is all will be sitting here in the requirement. Once we finish the requirements, guys, phase, we will be looking at design, and the design here is identify threats and controls or secure coding practice to meet the requirements. Okay, so here again, this is we do something here. I'm not sure if we talked about it before. We do something called threat modeling. Threat modeling, that means I will build the systems, and I'm gonna give it to you guys in a very simple way. I don't want to any complication, but it's important because could be really part of the interview. So they will say, okay, we are designing now the system. So the system will be consist of this area, which is the front page. We'll have a server tier. We'll have a database. Just give me 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. We have server tier, we have database, okay, and we need to look at the threat model. The threat model. Let's say that someone is trying to. This is an entry point for my server. What could really be threats that can exploit this system? What could be the vulnerability in these systems? And I will come up with a threat modeling, because threat modeling will allow me to understand what kind of practice I will do to really mitigate this risk. So I have here a form, and this form will collect the user input. And because it will collect the user input, there will be data entry here, okay? And the data entry here, the attacker will use it maybe to inject a code. Okay, this code is connected somehow to the database. How can I really implement here something in the application layer to stop the SQL injection? So this is kind of threat modeling is just the brainstorming what kind of entry points for the attacker to exploit the system, and what kind of vulnerability that exists, and how can I really defend this. And I remember once I was in interview with Amazon, okay, and they give me a diagram like this, and they said, okay, identify the threats here, identify the vulnerabilities, okay, and they give me a piece of code here from the web application, and they mentioned to me also, tell us what was wrong with this code. Okay, so there's a code was this code was allowing a SQL injection. So you highlight that there's a possibility of SQL injection. Okay, and also they will give you guys they will say, okay, how to mitigate this risk. Okay, so this is what happening in the design. So they wanted to understand, if you understand what kind of threats out there, what kind of vulnerabilities exist in the system, and how can really to mitigate this. And that's why in the design phase you really need to understand secure code practice. So you say, okay, I find this area is not secure. Okay, there is a possibility for an attack for SQL injection. The mitigation here by implementing something like stored procedures or parameterized query and all this other stuff. This is in the design phase, guys. Also in the security here, we look at the implementation phase. This is the implementation where your developer start to implement the system and write the code. We talked about this, and here it's saying we need to perform white box, which is source code analysis. And the source code analysis, we call it sometimes static analysis, and the static analysis is where you really go through the code and really try to find if there is a function or maybe libraries or maybe components that is not secure. Okay, this is before the code execution. This is only in the implementation. And the ways they do this, guys, they can do it in two ways. Okay, they will have something called pipeline, and in the pipeline you write the code, okay, and before this code is really changing anything, or before it's being deployed, you will go to a stage of the code here from different perspectives. If the code is vulnerable, it will return the code for modification. Okay, so the code will never pass this stage to the next stage without really reviewing the code using one of the tools. There is one tool that it's very common in this area. It's called Fortify. Fortify is really common, and they have cloud version and they have on-premises version. So you install the Fortify and really ask your team to submit the code here, and the Fortify will review this in review the code, and then it will give feedback to the developer. This is the implementation phase. Okay, and again, you can do also this by code reviewers or code review by one of your team or peer review. They will look at your code, and then if he is more experienced, he has more hands-on when it comes to security, he can really identify this. But I would say that the peer review is not effective. Why? Because first of all, sometimes you are running 1,000 lines of codes, so your peer review will take hours and hours. And I'm saying we are working in a very competitive environment right now. I cannot really wait for someone go through every lines, and it takes forever to him to get me good. I wanted really someone machinery or application or software to go through this. So this is one way to do the code review. The other way, if you have a web application firewall, web application firewall sometimes comes with I would say a module to review the code and tell you if there is any bad practice as well. So this is also in the implementation phase, guys. Okay. So here we mentioned that in the testing phase, خلاص, you done the implementation, you write all this code, you really need to look at how to test. And I said there is so many tests that we do in our development to really ensure that the software is good. We do something called unit testing, integral testing. Integral means that you are able to run this code within this environment without any integrity or any integration issues. Okay, and then finally also you run because you are running the code right now. You can do vulnerability scanning. Vulnerability scanning. We said there is this, there is open bus, there's something commercial, there's something open sources. You can use one of these tools to run against our running application. Okay, why? Because when you run the code, maybe will show a new vulnerability. Maybe it's in the environment. Maybe it's in one of these servers that you deploy the code in. Maybe again in the how the database is handling the requests coming from your application. You run to verify also. Also here in the testing environment, we do black boxing or a gray boxing analysis to test for vulnerability in the published application, and it is publication environment, which is maybe a cloud or whatever. Okay. Again, why is he saying there is a gray box and black box? Because black box, guys, we're gonna not give any credential. Okay, because black box in natural, we are trying to really simulate basically an external attacks, which is someone doesn't have any valid username and password. So when you simulating black box attacks, we don't have provide credential. Okay, in the gray box attacks, we are simulating someone from internally the environment who knows our username and password, and we try to see what kind of vulnerability these guys will discover. So that's why he mentioned here that we try to run black box and gray box to really find if there is any vulnerability that can be exposed from someone externally or someone internally. So this is, guys, also a part of the secure SDLC. Deployment here, guys, means source authenticity of installer package and best practice configuration guide. Means here in this stage, this is where I will take my my source code and all the other stuff and started to take it from the testing environment and deploy it in the production environment. And this is will require me to really see if my production environment is safe and secure. So I wanted to really to check if it's Windows that or the Linux that I'm installing in it is patched, is hardened, the services are disabled. There is also a proper authentication in these servers and authorization. So this is when you look at the environment that you install the software on top of it. So that's why it's saying here secure authenticity of installing a package and best practice configuration guides. The best practice means when it comes to security, how to really secure a Windows environment. So make sure that you implement a proper access control, a proper encryption, a proper hardening for the systems. So this is lastly, here is the maintenance, mean ongoing security monitoring and incident response procedures, patch development and management, and other security controls. Here, once we are deployed and once we up and running, we don't just have the systems and and you say, okay, system will be secure forever. This is no worries about this system anymore. This is wrong perception. Why it's wrong perception? Because I said the risk is changing. How the risk is changing? Okay, things that we thought it's secure is not secure anymore. So you implement your application in Windows environment. This Windows environment this month was really you installed all the patches, everything is okay. Next month, guys, we have a new vulnerability that emerged, and this vulnerability are critical. Okay, if I didn't apply this patch, someone will exploit the system and take advantage of the application and the system. Why? Because you didn't really maintain. Okay, even the software, guys, we written. Okay, so the software that are written, end of day, The scanner we used here, okay, the scanner we used here, which is was like a vulnerability scanner. End of day, vulnerability scanner work with a database, so it work with signatures, and this signature is changing and updating. So that's why you need to always do a penetration testing and vulnerability assessment in a regular basis. Why? Because things that is used to be secure, they find it is not 100% secure. Function that is used to be secure, someone find vulnerability in this function. So you always need to maintain. And that's why I'm saying that the security jobs is a continuous process. It's a continuous process, and the risk is a continuous process because you will never end. And that's why, inshallah, we will have a good career for maybe 10, 15 years. Okay, that's why, because there's always a constant updates and constant, but you need to really keep yourself updated and knowledge about cybersecurity. Okay, guys, so far so good. You understand now why we need the security development life cycles. We have
Yes, so far so good.
Okay, we have already covered, guys, so far. What is the development life cycles? We explained the stages, okay, and we explained what is the secure development life cycles. And before this, we talked about a supply chain risk and how supply chain risk can really push us towards to something like DevSecOps. And I explained DevSecOps and DevOps. This is also the trend is right now in security when it comes to secure your development lifecycle. Okay, so securing coding best practice. So we go again to how to secure our code. Okay, we have a code running now in one of our servers. What is really our concerns here? Okay, where did I get the input validation from? And I have shown you guys before, and I keep showing you this is okay. Don't invent the wheel. Okay, go and check what is the most common vulnerability exists out there. Where did I get this from? Again, if you go to here, guys, you can look at the secure coding best practice. Okay, you can see on top of this, there's an organization called OWASP. OWASP is very well known that they are publishing every 3 years a list of all the vulnerability that exists. And not only the vulnerability, they also give you guys kind of also what is the mitigation techniques for these vulnerabilities. Again, how did they come up with this risk? So you can find that OWASP, they have so many members all over the globes, okay? And they do so many researches and survey about cybersecurity. And eventually they will take all the surveys, they will consult with all their members, okay? And again, they will come up with a consolidated list for all these vulnerabilities. And mostly this vulnerability is what is the common right now when it comes to web application vulnerability, mobile application vulnerability, cloud vulnerabilities. So really they need to look at what vulnerabilities they publish, okay, and how to mitigate this. If you never seen their website, guys, I'm sorry that I didn't show you before the OWASP website. Maybe I have shown you guys. So this is their practice to how to implement secure coding practice. But in the same times, if you wanted to really to do quick search about OWASP, okay. So here, OWASP top 10. Okay, so it will take you here, guys. This is the first early beginning. It's just an ads, but here, OWASP top 10, they have this website. And again, OWASP top 10 is highlighting all 10, the 10 most vulnerable application. And the, sorry, the 10 top 10 vulnerable applications and how to deal with it. So it's say, okay, you know what, there is injections, there is broken authentication. If you hit here, guys, for example, in one of these vulnerabilities, you can tell it will give you an overview what is broken access control is all about. So you can read about the overview. You can look at the description, and then the most important thing for me is also the mitigation. So by end of this page, you will find how to prevent, okay? Not only how to prevent and how to detect as well sometimes, okay? And it give you also a scenario for these attacks, and it will give you some references as well. So this is all, guys, is very important for you as a developer, or for you as a someone who work in security, to understand, okay, is my application is vulnerable for broken access control? Okay, let me check what is broken access control, and let's check how to prevent these attacks. And once you understand how to prevent the attacks, you can go back to your developers and make sure that they understand this concept and implement this concept. So this is how you can reflect your company. Okay, I think this is we started the lecture a long time ago, and I see a lot of people, a lot of you guys need some breaks. I understand that's where this is coming from. It's been like 1 hour and a half, so we'll take, guys, 15 minutes break. Is it good? 15 minutes break is good to just try to, refresh and get some tea. And we will come back around 10:50 your time, right? Okay. So 10:50, inshallah, we'll be back, and then we'll continue the lecture for today. Thank you guys very much. Again, where did we get this input validation best practice idea? And when would we get this output encoding? Again, if we go again to our OWASP website, if you guys allow me to show you the OWASP website here again, this one, the OWASP secure best practice here is basically, let me try to go back here. Not, yes, here. Okay, so OWASP secure coding practice over here. The first thing they suggest for you to really ensure website or application security is to do an input validation. Why? Because we are worried about the inputs that we getting from user. Why? Because we don't trust who is trying to really access our website. So one of the really things that's it's really highlighting all the time to stop the injection attacks or to mitigate the attacks is input validation. Okay, why we already today we looking at web application, guys, and keep emphasizing about web application security and saying that input validation should be always in your defenses, because again, if you guys remember, and inshallah we see this later on when we start to talk about web application, the first early beginning in the attacking phases is called footprinting or reconnaissance, or the attackers will try to gather information about you as much as they can. And one of the sources they will find it out there, let's say this is your organization. Okay, your organization will be internally. You have your IT, you have staff, and you have your DMZ, where is your web application is and mail server is. Okay, so the mail server, they don't know how to really deal with it, but they will scan it. But the website here is the very attractive point to attack. And basically, the attacker will start to look for any forms over here that they can inject a code to it. Okay, so it's saying, the first thing you really make sure that you secure your web application, because your web application is where everyone can see in the world. Okay, especially if you moved your web application to the cloud. So this is will make it accessible to everywhere, and you're losing part of the security as well here because you moved it to the cloud. Okay, so you are still, even you moved it to the cloud, you're still responsible for the security of your data and your application and your operating system. Okay, so the attacker will start to log into your web server, try to evaluate your web server from the security perspective. They try to evaluate this web server from the attacker perspective, and they try to really try to execute any code in your web server. This is why we said that web server is really important to secure. So one of the security best practice here that is recommended, and this is the lecture of today is all about, is basically we are trying to secure our application and from attacks. So it's saying you need to do an input validation. And again, what is input validation and why it's important? Again, because you are a way for a server to collect data is to open a form and this form will collect the data. And I will show you a quick form over here that can show you this. This is a very simple form, and this is how it looks like. And you can see, guys, here it will accept a user ID and password, and there is a button here to you. When you click, it will allow you to log in. Okay, so this is the input. This is the input from the user. If the user decided later on to really modify this input to be more malicious, okay, we'll see what happens. It will lead to so many attacks. So we have something called cross-site scripting. We have something called SQL injection, and we can see how this injecting a code here, okay, and not really filter this code in a proper way will lead to so many problems. Okay, you should be, so an application is giving a string input. String input what? I have opened a data entry box for my users to enter their names or their mobile numbers. So this is where it starts. Okay, so be subjected to normalization or sanitization procedures before being accepted. What we mean by this, guys, once someone added a number here, you really need to implement something called sanitization, input sanitization or input validation. And the input validation, guys, can be done in two ways. Okay, can be done in the client side and on the server side. What we mean by client side and server side? So when the user enter any data, okay, we have something called the client side. This is where your HTML, your JavaScript, your CSS cascading style sheet is there, okay, and you have a server side. This is where your PHP is there, or maybe your C Sharp, or maybe your Java is here, PHP. Sorry, this is PHP. Okay, in order for the users, ASP.NET, as Ibtisam is saying, okay, and when the user entered the data here, you need to validate this user's input here in the client side, okay, in the JavaScript. So as you can see here, if the user didn't enter a proper data here, what will happen? The right away, your JavaScript will give him an error message that what you ever enter here was not right. So this is what we call client input validation. So this is happening with the client. Unfortunately, guys, the client input validation, okay, it cannot really protect you. It's a way to protect you, but it's not very effective. Why? Because there's so many attackers, they can really disable in their browser the JavaScript. So your all JavaScript code that you implemented in this page will not be working, and he can really proceed to the next stage. So again, we are worried about the injection. We are worried about the bad guys injecting bad code to us. Okay, so how can we really stop this, guys? We can stop this by implementing validation in two levels. Validation happens in the client side. Okay, this is your web browser itself, and the validation happens in the server side. Okay, so the validation happens on the client side. It's done by JavaScript. So the JavaScript can run and can execute. If it sees something suspiciously coming, it can really say, you know what? No, I'm not gonna take this input. This is not valid input. Okay, but the attacker are smart. They really manage in so many cases to really bypass the client side. So we need to implement here the what we call the server side. The server side, the attacker cannot see, okay, and they have no control out of it, okay. But in the client side, they can see and they can bypass it. So if you example here, this is a very simple way to really do an input validation. So here it's saying integer day. 0 means the day is starting with 0, as we called it the initialization of a code. Okay, but you guys, if you can see here, this is do while kind of procedures. We're not going to talk about do while right now, but this is kind of, you know, what you will do. So we have a function here called printf. That means that you're going to print something for the user. It's saying enter the day of the month. So you will enter the day of the month. And there is a function here called the scanf. The scanf is going to really read the day, okay, and save it in the variables that we have already defined here. So now is I enter a number, or maybe the attacker will say, okay, let me see if I enter a code here, or I entered a comma here, or I entered maybe the word script here, what will happen? Okay, if you didn't do any input validation, it will whatever the attacker will do, it will be saved under this variable. Okay, and then later on, if this variable is executed somewhere in the code, it will execute the code, and it's not going to execute the basically the data. So if I wanted to do a validation here, if you can see, guys, here this code is saying if day is less than 1 or day is more than 31, okay, print if error day must be an integer, must be between 1 and 31. Okay, guys, so this is kind of really an input validation, okay, methodology. Do you guys understand what is this code is all about? I know this is not coding practicing area, okay, but I'm just trying to tell you how we can really look at input validation, because input validation is important. At least if you don't understand it, okay, you can understand the concept. When you talk to someone in the development team, you said, okay, we have so many forms in this website. How did we do when it comes to input validation? Okay, they will tell you, oh, in input validation, we have done this and this. You said, okay, how about the client side? How did you do in the client side? How you do it in the server side? So you really need to understand the idea behind input validation. So why I'm doing input validation again? Because I'm worried about SQL injection. Sorry, about any injection. Why I'm worried about the injection? Because this is the first thing the attacker will do. We have an automated tools, like we have scanners for vulnerability. They have their own scanners, and they will try to really fuzz your application. Fuzzing your application means they send different inputs to different data fields and see how your application will react. And accordingly, they can tell if your application is susceptible for injection attack or no. So we really worried about the injection attack, and that's why we do input validation. Also, we need to do something called output encoding, okay, and normalize output. And I will say what is normalizing output, and I'll give you an example for it. And this is, again, output encoding and input validation, they can work to mitigate cross-site scripting and SQL injection. Okay, so we understand now how input validation works. Let's go and start to understand what is normalized output it looks like, and how it's really being done in an application. Just this is just an example, not like a very complex one. So in PHP, guys, we have, this is first of all, let's try to identify what is cross-site scripting. I know that I have explained it before, but I'm gonna explain it one more time. So we have a website, and this website is not really validating the input from the attacker. So what the attacker will do, they will inject a code. They will inject, especially in cross-site scripting, they will inject JavaScript code. And this JavaScript code will be here in the website. And once our poor user here, guys, will be visiting this website, because the code is injecting in this website, it will be executed on the browser here. And usually what the attacker will do when they inject this code, and this code will be executed in your browser, they will try to steal some sensitive information about yourself, about you, okay? So basically, maybe you have the authentication cookies that you are used to access this website. So there's something called the session key or authentication cookies. They can really instruct the Java script right here to steal this cookie and send it back to the attacker over here. So this is a cross-site scripting in a very simple way. Okay, but there is so many types of cross-site scripting. There's something called reflected scripting. Reflected cross-site scripting. Some other is called stored cross-site scripting. There's others is called DOM, DOM, which is basically the objects that exist in the page, cross-site scripting, and all of them are cross-site scripting attacks. But mainly what's happening is the attacker will craft JavaScript. He will inject it somehow, or who will let the website to reflect it in the user. The user, the script will be executed in the users, and the attacker will manage to steal this data. So what is output normalization looks like? Okay, so here, guys, this is one of the functions that I can implement in my PHP, okay? And it will be implemented where? In the server side. So when I get input from the attackers here, and this an input include a script. So this is the script, okay? So what happened is this script, guys, will be saved in this variable, okay? When I save it in this variable, if I save it the way it is, it will be executed as a script. No ways, it will be executed. But what if anything that I will get from the users or get from the attacker, I will add before him a function called HTML encoding. So what is HTML encoding will do? HTML encoding, this is the function. I'm gonna inject here the the attacker code, which is this one, okay, which is Java alert XSS script. Okay, so in a normal way, without HTML encoding, the code will be saved in your variable and then will be executed by the user. But HTML encoding, before saving it to the variable, it will turn every single special character to something else. So let's look at here, guys. So the word script, the greater than and the lesser than, it will be turned to this blue signs, okay? And you have alert, okay, and then you have this comma over there. The HTML encoding will turn it to and sign, okay? And then you have the comma here will be turned to the end sign, and another script will be also this one. It will be replaced with this one, okay? So now this code will be saved on your variable, okay? When this code execute, guys, it will not execute as a script. Why? Because there is no script anymore. This greater than and smaller than, we got rid of it already, okay? You guys get what is HTML encoding are doing? Okay, now the attackers, okay, we mentioned that we need to really validate the input. Okay, how can we validate the input? We can validate the input by blocking this input from the client side or the server side. Okay, so the client side, we mentioned that it's good, but it's not effective. So let's really look at how the attacker will inject the code to our server side. When you inject the code, I don't want this code to be effective. So I wanted to get rid of all this comma, greater than, lower than that can cause harm, because this is basically a code. What the attacker right here, guys, is basically a code. I wanted really to make sure this is not code anymore. So I wanted really to get rid of all these extra signs over here. So how can I do this? By using a function like HTML encoding, which is going to turn everything which is not part of this as a string to a specific characters. Okay, and you can see the encoding table, and you can see that comma will turn to this and all this other stuff. Okay, guys, do you understand what that means? Okay, so when we have our poor users right now log into the website, okay, even if he see the post or even he sees the picture posted by the attacker, it will not be executed in his browser because now this is not code anymore. So this is one of the example of encoding. I know this is, guys, is a bit advanced because we didn't study really coding in this program, but I'm sure it's easy to understand because this is like really basics stuff I'm explaining here. It's not like really advanced stuff. Okay, so we talked about normalizing output. How do we normalize output? By something called encoding, and this is will mitigate the injection and cross-site scripting, and it will also mitigate the encryption of what of SQL injection. Okay, because SQL injection is all about special characters and commas and all this stuff. So this is will not be executable anymore. So another thing that we really need to do, okay, in order to mitigate SQL injection specifically, because SQL injection is a big thing, okay, we have something called parameterized queries. Okay, what is a parameterized query in a very simple way? So what I'm worried about here in this area, okay, so the problem is, so let me explain what is SQL injection first, and I will explain what is parameterized query, guys. So SQL injection means that I will inject a code that can really query a database, okay, and really get me an output from this database. So this is a SQL injection. And how it works, basically, if you win, first of all, in order to stop the SQL injection, you need to also to implement input validation in the client side and also in the server side. So we do client validation for the user inputs. But again, another layer of defense that you really can implement is parameterized query. So what happens is, if I have dynamic query in my PHP, let's say this is my PHP application, okay, and I wrote a SQL command like this one. So I said, okay, select, okay, from the database, okay, where the user is and the password is. When I write this command, guys, and I didn't do any input validation, anything the attacker, especially if I didn't do any input validation here in the user side or on the server side, what will happen is, whatever the attacker will add or whatever the attacker will do, okay, it will be passed to my query here, okay? So the attacker knows very well how to structure SQL selective statement. We will add here special characters to really say, you know what, I'm gonna give you certain user and I will bypass the password so I can log into this application without a proper password. So we add dash dash, which is really committed the part of the password. We add one equal to one to really match any users that exist in the systems, and they will be able by this SQL injection, very small attacks, to really act, to really look into the system as if they are authenticated users. Okay, and maybe once they are logged in as authenticated users, they can do whatever they want. Okay, or they will manage to get to your system. Again, how they do this, guys? When I created my web page here, okay, which is a web page of PHP, I collected the user input, okay, and when I collected the user input, I collected with any input validation, and I also collected the password part without any validation. And now I'm creating the select. They called it this dynamic query, and I'm taking whatever the user gives me and I'm adding it in my query. Okay, so I added a code to a code. And once this code is executed, the user will be able to log into the web page. This is in a very simple way how SQL injection works. Okay, I think I have a slides here, guys, explaining how SQL injection works, because I know that sometimes it's confusing to not to see how it works. So let me show you this one over here. This is directory traverse. This is code-side scripting. I already talked about it. We talked about insecure system hijacking, SQL injection. So this is how it works, guys. Okay. So this is select from table user where username is Bob and the password is password. Okay. So what happened is the user will manage to really say, you know what, instead of really inserting, Bob here, what I will do, I will add another comma and I will say or 1 = 1, and then I will comment the rest of the password. So this is will not be even looked at. And because I'm giving now my website saying, I have a users, okay, or 1 = 1. This is for SQL is always true. That means it will match the users that exist in the table of users, and this specific command will allow the user to log in the system without a password, and he now in this kind of attack he bypassed your authentication. Okay, so how can we really stop this? First of all, as I mentioned, you need to implement input validation. This input validation can be done in two levels, the client level and the server level. So what if I can, what if I wanted to add another defense and depth mechanism? Okay, then it tells you don't use basically a SQL statement, dynamic SQL statement, and use something more stronger like a parameterized query. So if we look here, guys, so this is the select SQL statement. So you're saying select, okay, count user ID from user login. This is a table where user equal to what? User ID, and password equal to what? ID, okay? So where I will get the parameters here, guys. So the parameters here, guys, will comes from these kind of two parameters over here. So now what I have created with this query, just let me explain it in plain English, and then I will explain it in the code wise. The parameterized query, I wanted really to create a difference between this is the username and password, okay? This is the username and password. What I was trying to do in the parameterized query, I wanted to say, you know what, I wanted to really differentiate between the control statement, okay, and the data statement, okay? So when you send me a data, I will put it in two parameters, okay? And this can be only data, okay? So even if you send me a code and this code is saved here, it will not be stated because this is a code, okay? While in the parameters here, I wanted to really look at this. I wanted to really look at the parameters. This is parameter number 0. It's saying the SQL parameters, users, and see, I'm gonna get a text. I'm gonna specify that I'm gonna get a text from the user. Okay, so if the user submit anything except the text, will not be accepted. Why? Because this is the parameter number 1. I'm expecting text. So I can tell to my application that you should expect text from the user. If the user tries to put any other thing like rather than text, it will not be accepted. And again, if you look at the password also here, I'm expecting a text from the user. And this text will be saved in the parameter number 1. So I'm expecting text format. So in parameterized query, I can specify the type of data that I'm getting from the user. If the user tries to submit a code instead of this data, it will not be acceptable, guys. So this is here. Add the parameter 1 and add parameter 2 and open a connection and then execute the select statement. And when we execute the select statement, guys, it will go and it's really gonna look at this command, and this command is saying select count user ID from user login, where the user ID equal to ID, which is the parameter number 1, and the password equal to the password, which is the parameter number 2. So if the attacker try to use or to really send you a code, it's not acceptable because in the parameter side, I mentioned clearly, I'm waiting for a text and not a code. So this is how to really prevent this kind of attack from coding perspective. Okay, this is another thing that we look at, guys. Okay. Okay, guys, so far so good. I know this is a bit of programming. I know that's not everyone is very enthusiastic about the programming, but it's really important to also to look at this part. Okay, another thing that, guys, another vulnerability that exists and it causes a lot of also of issue is basically called directory traverse. Where the directory traverse as a vulnerability emerge from? Where it's coming from, guys? Here is the attackers, when he look at your URL, okay, your URL is basically is directory after directory, and the attackers knows, guys, that these directories are really representing, especially if you're using Linux Apache server, these directory, guys, or even Windows server, okay, or even any operating system. Directory means folders, okay? So for example, you will find in Linux operating system, you will find a directory called etc, okay? And then in etc, you will find www, and under www, you find another folder where is the HTML component is, okay? But that what that, or maybe if you are in Windows and you have application running for IIS or something, you will be under end pub, and then end pub you have a folder for HTML. So what the attacker will do is, the attacker will say, you know what, how can I move back to the original? Because if I move back to the original, I will go back to the root, okay, or maybe to Windows System 32, and then I can execute this command. Okay, so what he's doing is right now, he's wanted to jump back to the proper directory where he can really execute this command. If he managed to execute this command, guys, he will get a shell into your computer. How? By just jumping back to the original. And if you don't implement any access control or any permission to prevent this jump back to the original root, what will happen? This command will be executed. Why? Because you didn't implement access control. So if someone was in directory here, okay, and wanted to jump back to directories, okay, and you don't have any permission over here in this directory, it will allow him to get this to this directory, okay? And once he get this directory, he can execute his command. Okay, so access control, guys, is important. And that's why sometimes when you reach a website and you try to jump between pages, this website site, you can find a message, this area is prohibited, okay, or this page is prohibited, or this directory is prohibited. Why? Because they implemented a proper access control. And the proper access control is what will stop the attack from taking place over here, guys. So this is another way, okay? File inclusion are the same thing. And the file inclusion, what the attacker will do, guys. So everyone understand what is directory traverse or travel is? Basically, you travel from one directory to one directory, either to look for sensitive data or either to execute a command, okay, guys? And if you don't have a proper file permission, okay, what will happen? You would until you will get to the root. Okay, perfect. File inclusion, guys, it can be done in so many ways. But what I have seen it, they do this. If I have a website, let's say I have a website over here, and this website will allow you to upload files. Okay. If you manage to upload a file, okay, and this file was malicious, guys. So this is a file which is malicious. I created a file maybe using MS Venom, okay, or maybe using any tool that is creating a file as a backdoor. If I manage to really upload this file to the server, so where is this file now? It's becoming a part of the servers, and it's part of the files in exist in this server. So let's say this file is malicious. If I manage to execute this file, whatever in this file will be executed in the servers, and I will get maybe a backdoor to the server. So what the attacker is good at is really the good at uploading certain files to the servers, okay, and understand which directory this file has been uploaded to. So if they uploaded to a file called uploads backslash, road backslash etc backslash www, okay, if they manage to come to your server and from the browser of your server reach this file and execute it, this file execute, and whatever malicious files inside this file will be executed. So for example, I know this file is under www malicious backslash, and then he added the malware. If I wrote this, okay, and I manage when I write this to reach to your upload files, this file, because I wrote malware.php and I have the malware here, it will not for sure be a malware.php, but maybe they can really deceive it and say resume.html or whatever, but it's a PHP. Once I reach this web page and execute this file will be executed in your server, and it will give the attacker a remote shell to your web server. So make sure that when you are getting any files, this is because this is again back to the input validation. Okay, so make sure that when you are getting any files from even your users, make sure it's a proper format. Make sure these files are really cannot be accessed again from the internet, because this is going to be the main issue here, that you accepted a file which is not in a proper format. So maybe you accepted an exe file or PHP file. So this is the first issue, the input validation. And the second issue is you allowed someone, okay, from his browser to really reach a very restricted area in your system and look at your uploads. That means if there is something uploaded here is very important, he can steal it. So this is kind of, you can implement input validation and also file permission and restriction for who can reach this file and who can execute this file. And this is again back to the file permission in Linux or in Windows. When these files are there, who can execute this file? If you leave the file for everyone to execute, what will happen is anyone with even a browser can execute these files and cause so much down. So you need to make sure who can access this file and the file permission. So this is the file inclusion, guys. Again, here's the cross-site scripting attacks and how it's done. So this is like a full explanation for what is cross-site scripting. And again, why we learn about cross-site scripting and other vulnerability and what is the mitigation for these vulnerabilities is basically because they are very common in the wild and they can be part of your web application. So you really need to advise your developer, and you really need to implement input validation and client server validation and server validation, and also do some output normalization as well. Okay, so we talked about this. Software design vulnerabilities, guys. As I mentioned before, the software design vulnerabilities means that when you design and really code your servers, sometimes the coder, they will go and bring a component or a function that they have already used it before, or maybe someone written a really cool function online, okay, and he will be including it or important to his software. The problem is if you don't do a proper testing for this component, could be the early beginning of the attack, or someone can attack you from this component. And that's why using insecure components can really lead to an exploitation. And that's why if you go to Mike over here to OWASP top 10, you will find one of these practices is to make sure this component that you are using is secure. So if we go here, you will find one of the is called component security. So input validation we already covered, output encoding, classification and password management, session management, cryptographic error handling, data protection, counter security, memory, it's file management, database. What is the OWASP top 10? Okay, so let's go to OWASP top 10. You will find insecure component is definitely one of the top issues that we are facing right now. Why? Because you basically use software and data integrity failures, crypto failures, injection, insecure design. It will be under insecure design. Insecure design means you are using components which was not really secure by default. Okay, and that's why it's saying software design vulnerability, insecure component. Could reuse or third-party library or a binary package that implement some standard functionality, establish a network connectivity, or performing cryptography, or each library must be monitored for vulnerability and patched properly. Why? Because you are getting a component or function, and if it's not secure, it's going to really lead to insecurity. Also, the software development kit that you are using to develop the software need also, this is another part of your development stages. So you need to get this software to be secure as well. Otherwise, can someone really so what you need to do in order to protect against this, you do you do logging and monitoring for these components, and you also do penetration testing and keep these components updated. This is can help you to really overcome this issue. Okay, authentication attacks, guys. Authentication attacks means that someone is trying to authenticate to a web application and someone managed to steal his session keys or his session cookies, or maybe he managed to monitor the traffic that's going between the client and the servers. So authentication attacks is really common, okay, and it can be done in a multiple ways. But again, what is authentication attacks is all about? I have a server and I have a client, and this server will be trying to log into the client and he will be trying to authenticate. So one of the attacks is very common is basically is to have man of the middle attacks, whether this man of the middle attacks is a router in the internet who's monitoring this traffic, or maybe the wireless provider who give you the wireless. So anyway, there's someone is trying to really steal your credentials. Okay, how can we really overcome this issue by data in transit? Is basically by encrypting the data, and that's why we studied the PKI and the certificate and all this other stuff that we have already covered before. Okay, guys. So transparently capture monitors, MITM, which is man of the middle attacks. Attacks could also be used to covertly modify the traffic. So means that if someone can really see the traffic between you and the servers, you can later on change this traffic. So maybe you are doing a bank transfer, and this bank transfer from your bank to your wife bank, and then what he can do, instead of from your bank to his wife bank, he can transfer it from your bank to his bank. So this is also what is really dangerous about man of the middle attack, and that's what we consider man of the middle attacks as active attacks. We talked about there is something called passive attacks and active attacks. So the passive attacks, you're only monitoring the traffic. Active attacks, you can really get involved and modify the traffic. Is basically one of the ways to launch an active MTI or man of the middle attacks is to use a Dragon software to replace some genuine software in the system. So it's saying that you can really also monitor the traffic. If you infected this machine with a spyware, okay, you can also steal the user credential as well. Okay. Another attack that is already over there and started to really, emerge in the last years is something called password spraying and credential stuffing. And in the password spraying, basically, the attacker will choose one or more common password, for example, password or 1234, and tries them in conjunction with multiple username in your website. So basically, if you don't implement a proper password policy here, that your password should be, strong and complex, and really there is a password history as well involved. This is will allow the attacker to gain access to one of your account, and this is will cause an authentication attacks. Also, credential stuffing this means the attacker tests username and password combination against multiple online sites. This is what the attacker will get a list of all usernames. He will have a list of all usernames and list of all passwords, okay, and he will try it against a lot of websites. And this is what we call sometimes this dictionary attacks. And where the username and password we get it from, there is so many sources out there, guys, in the online, okay, and we can see that inshallah one lab, what we will do is we do something called Hydra, and you will see that if we don't have lookup policy or lookout policy, you can keep using different combination of username and password until you find the right combination to log into the website. Where the attacker will get the username and password, so you can say, you know what, password dictionary. What the attacker will do is password dictionary, okay, and then download. It will take you to so many websites here. If you get to GitHub, you will find so many password already files. Okay, you can download it, and this password files later on, you can use it in your. This is like a brute force or dictionary attacks. So the attacker are really good in doing this. So this is also a common type of attack. So how to really mitigate against these attacks. Again, you implement a proper password policy, and then you implement the lookout for your account. If someone tries more than 5 times, then I need to lock his account. Okay, so this is also we have covered, maybe we covered before as well. Okay, we wanted to talk about now session hijacking and attacks types. So session hijacking means what? What is session to start with, and what is a cookies? We really need to understand that's one of the methodology for a web application to be able to recognize user is to create for them a cookie or to create for them a piece of information that they will keep it in their browser or they will keep it in the hard drive. So it's easy for the web application to recognize them. And this can be done in 2 ways. So the web application here, because why this is to start with, HTTP, guys, as a protocol, it is a stateless protocol. It cannot escape your state. You remember when we talked about firewall, stateful firewall? The stateful firewall can tell if a user open a connection from the inside to outside and someone is replying back because it keep a state table, it can tell who created this connection from inside to outside and what kind of data has been exchanged because I have a state. HTTP doesn't have a state table. So what happened is when someone log into a web page, okay, he knows where he is. Why? Because he logged to this web page. If he tried to go to another web page inside the website itself, what will happen? Because the HTTP cannot really carry out the states, it will ask him to really authenticate again, and so on. So if you have 10 pages and I visited the 10 pages and we don't have any mechanism to really recognize you, I will have you to authenticate the 10 pages. So what they did is they said, okay, you know what? We will send the user here, browser, or we will send the user piece of data. So if he presented, that means this is my users, and he can go around my website without re-authentication again. So the way they do this in 2 ways. They do this in cookies and they do this in session. The difference between cookies and session, the cookies is managed by end users. So your computer basically, whether it's a browser or whether this cookies in your hard drive, and the session is managed by the server. Which one is more secure? Because this is, we're talking about security here, sessions. Why? Because cookies, guys, as long as it's in your computer, someone can attack your computer and manipulate these cookies. Okay, and someone can really steal these cookies. Or even the users here, if he's a malicious user, if he got this cookie, he can really be malicious and understand how this cookie is created, and then later on attack your system. So the cookies, because it's managed and it's there and it's in the client side, it's not as secure as what I create here in the server side. So sessions are created by the servers, and then later on the server will send you something called session ID. You will use it for a period of time as long as you authenticate it. After this period of time, this session will destroyed, and you really need a new session again. And who is creating you a new session again? The server, the web server again. So this is the idea behind session. So the session can be including your name, okay, your authorization in this website, which pages you can access and which pages you cannot. So this is all in your session. Okay, so the attacker is really interested to steal either your cookies or session. And this is what we call the session hijacking. Why they are interested to do this, guys? Because basically, if I steal your session, I can impersonate you. So if I manage to do any attack that allow me to get your session here, I can import this session in my browser, and I can act as you to this website server. And this is what we call session hijacking or session impersonating. Again, here it's saying that cookies are used to store confidential information. The web application should encrypt them before sending them to the client. Why? Because I'm worried. Why I have the web server need to really encrypt the session ID or the cookies? Because I'm worried about the man of the middle attacks. Why I'm worried about the man of the middle attack? If someone captures the session, we will be able to see your session ID and then impersonate you. And that's why we implement the certificates. In the beginning, if you guys remember, we talked about something called TLS handshake. And the TLS handshake, when you are really trying to log in the first time to any website, you will do hello message to this website. the website will reply with hello from the server side, and in this hello from the server side, it will send you something called the certificate. And the certificate, in a very easy way, it's a public key for this website of server. And then before you try to log in to the web server, you will encrypt all your username and password before you send it with the TLS public key and send it over. Okay, once you get the data, once you authenticated, the server or the web server will send you the session key. The session key, what you keep in your browser to really show that you are authenticated users. Okay, so it's saying here basically before any communication happen between you and these servers, and before authentication and before the session key, you need to implement security first. You need to implement the TLS, or you need to exchange certificate and start to encrypt the traffic. If using SSL information in cookies would be secure in transit. So this is basically security in transit, okay? But reside on the client computers in a plain text unless it and has been separately encrypted. This is, again, what is really different between the cookies and the session. The cookie will be residing in your computer. If your computer is not secure, okay, someone will can able, we encrypted the data when this data is going to you using TLS. But if these cookies are residing in your computer as a plain text, and someone managed to compromise your computer, they will be able to put their hand in this cookie, and they can really cause you damage. Okay, that's why cookie is not really the proper way to do this. Is basically is the session. Okay, sorry, is the session is more secure. Okay, last thing here, we wanted to talk about something called cross-site request 4G. And what is cross-site request 4G, guys? Because this is really important topic, and this is also somehow I'm hijacking your session. Okay, so in very simple way, let's say that you have a website here, okay, and you as an end user is here, okay, and this is the attacker over here, okay, and this kind of attacks, guys, it requires that the attackers and you are really in communication. So how this is working? Um,
Hi guys, I'm so sorry. I think it's a network issue in Sherry. I think he had a network issue. No, he's not here. I'm not sure really what happened. Oh, think so. So that he will be back soon. No worry. Oh my goodness. It's an enjoyable session, as I think. All of you supposed to know more about WASP top 10 vulnerabilities and CVVs and its severity and how it can be affecting in the APIs or web-based application. All of these severities, all of these vulnerabilities have many severities, and different severities can affect these applications. So when we are in the coding process, we're supposed to make some scans to ensure that our code is not vulnerable. We must add a DevSecOps team to work together when coding or development life cycle from the scratch. I have no idea if are you hear me clearly or not, but I know that my voice is not okay today. I'm tired a bit, so sorry for that.
No problem, Ms. Afir. Be safe and get well.
Thank you, Ms. Saiba. Inshallah. Thank you, Maha. So sorry, guys. Try to get more information about these vulnerabilities assigned as a top 10 by WASP team. It's a common vulnerability. It's non-vulnerabilities. And it can be affected much. Not only this vulnerability can be affected in our environment or our code when we are in coding progress. We have a much of them, but these are assigned as a common vulnerabilities and non-vulnerabilities by WASP team. And be informed that at all the time, if this vulnerability severity is low, it can be affected. So be care about all of them, regardless the severity of the vulnerability. Sherry still had a problem. Oh my goodness. Yes, today lab about WASP top 10. You're supposed to search deeply and to know about the vulnerability and severity and how it can be affected and how it can be mitigated. We have a much of solution to mitigate these vulnerabilities, but the best way by scanning from the scratch before deployment. After deployment or after the service launched, we're supposed to go about another mechanism to scanning and to mitigate. but we need to build a secure application from the scratch. By scanning the code, mitigate the vulnerability management, and enhance our code without changing anything in the code. After that, we can deploy it. No, not group assignment. I think I'm not sure. We'll see that at that time. I'm not sure exactly, is it a group assignment or not? But we can manage it. Let's see with Asad how we can manage. If is it possible, we can make it as a group assignment. If it is not, it's supposed to, in my mind, supposed to be individual to know about your innovations. How can you work with the WASP top 10 vulnerabilities? Let's see. I'm not sure, Lamia. Is it a group or not? But I can discuss with the Asad on this and find the better way to work on. Even you are going to work on it individually, you can share your mind with your colleague and get more ideas and work individual after that. All of us totally agree with Lamia. Me also totally agree with Lamia and you, Sam. Sorry. Oh, I'm not familiar with the situation, by the way, Lamia. I'm a hard worker woman at all the time. I'll try to do that. Thank you. Okay, it is 11:53, so we can go to make our break. I'm back at 1:15, I think, as I said, used to with you at all the time. Oh, enjoying your break. Today, my cohort in a silence mode. I'm not shady. You can talk. Bye-bye. See you at 1:15, inshallah. Bye. Enjoy. Have a fun time.